Welcome to the 100th episode of the Corporate Treasury 101 podcast. For the occasion, we interview Joost Kevelam from Cobase. This episode is a bit of a milestone for us. Obviously, as it is 1 year now that Hussam and I are hosting the podcast, we wanted to have a special episode for the occasion. Our conversation with Joost has been very insightful, interactive, and we had lots of fun whilst learning more about a topic close to my heart, bank connectivity. In the episode of today, expect to learn what is bank connectivity, what is it used for, and why it is critical for corporate treasurers. What is an EBS, an electronic banking system, and how do smaller companies can leverage that tool? What type of information are exchanged between a bank and a corporate, in which formats, and the different channels possible? How Cobase facilitates bank connectivity for corporates by taking on all the implementation and technicalities off the hands of the treasury teams. What is Cobase offer and how they grow it along with connecting more and more corporates with their banks, especially in periods of merger and acquisitions. And so much more. We hope you enjoyed the episode as much as we did discussing with Joost. It was super interesting learning more about the nitty-gritty details of what is happening between the corporates and their banks from a technical standpoint as well. If you want to know more about Joost, Cobase, or the different points we tackle in the episode, do not hesitate to check out the description, as we will put all the relevant links and information there. With all that being said, please welcome Joost Kevelam.
So, hello, Joost. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks. Yourself, Hussam.
Very well, thank you. You and I are here. We're excited to dig into the topic of the day. Before we get into that, perhaps you could introduce yourself to our audience and explain to us exactly what you do.
Yes, sure. My pleasure. Yes, my name is Joost Kevelam, and the key thing that I do at Cobase is making sure that we deliver on our customer promise. Now, what the business card says is that I'm the Chief Commercial Officer, and that means that I run everything that has to do with our corporate client franchise. So that is from marketing and business development to sales and client implementations.
Okay, and you mentioned Cobase. What's Cobase? Who are Cobase and what do they do? And why are you on the Corporate Treasury 101 podcast with us?
Yes, sure. So Cobase is a all-in-one multi-banking as a service solution for corporate treasury teams. We help these teams to navigate the very complex field of bank connectivity, cash management, and payment infrastructure. And to put it differently, typically our clients have to deal with 5 to 50 different bank relationships. And without a technology partner, this is very complex. So we at Cobase aim to take away this complexity and make this as simple, efficient, and compliant as possible for them. Here on the podcast, really because of your invitation, which is much appreciated. Looking forward to share our view and my thoughts on this specific topic.
Awesome. And maybe to begin with and dig into one of the topics you mentioned, Joost, can you start maybe by breaking down what bank connectivity is as a concept?
Yeah, sure. Bank connectivity is all about how a company exchanges data or information between themselves and their banks. And in its most basic form, very least that you do want to know as a corporate treasurer or as a treasury team are to know your account balances. So the account balances from accounts at all banks. Then the question is, how do you get that information? And well, if you do not do anything else, what you could do is you could log in every morning at 9 o'clock in the morning in five different banking portals, copy paste the information into Excel, and there you have it, a overview.
So they will do that to, I guess, get the information that their bank can provide them, right? So you mentioned account balances. Why else would corporate needs bank connectivity, and what are the type of informations that are going from there?
So the balances is the first thing, and then there's the manual part of it. So the bank connectivity, as we discussed it up until now, it is this manual process of logging in. And obviously, this is not the best use of one's time, and it's risky. So you have different logins, different tokens. You make typos in copying the information, fat fingers, and The surprising part is that still we see this happening a lot, even at very well-known and reputable companies. Manual processes are still there. Treasury teams know this is a messy thing. When they start Googling for solutions, then they quickly come across this thing called bank connectivity, where we started off. And then typically step one is to get these account balances in place. But to your question, Guillaume, the other bits of information that are very much needed is, for example, the transaction information. So are my accounts receivable, are they being fulfilled by the customers, for example? So really, why do they need to get this connectivity in place and well organized? Well, really to get account balances and transaction statements from the banks to themselves, and the other way around to send the payment files. That's what I don't think touched yet, but the other way around, of course, is to send the payment files over the same connectivity from themselves to their banks. And again, also this is a part that you want to automate, because also here the manual processes are very much inefficient and risky.
Okay. You get your account balances, I guess, for your cash positioning, right? So it allows you to see how much money you have.
Yeah.
You also reconcile who paid you, because you eventually want to make sure your clients pay you, right?
Yeah.
And the overall bank connectivity objective is to get away from manual processes. I guess automation as well. Like as many banks you can have, the more you can automate, the better, right? If you have, like, as you mentioned, 10, 50 banks, you want to automate all this and then just make data-driven decisions and less manual tasks. Super clear.
Yes.
Let's say, why do banks need that information? This is corporate treasury 101. I'm the guy that doesn't know anything about treasury. Like, why do I even need to? Why do I have multiple bank accounts, and why do I need to know the balance of them daily?
Well, typically you have multiple banks because you are an international company, and there are a few banks that have a very, very strong global cash management position, but even the largest global transaction banks still very much have their own expertise areas. So some banks, you might perceive them as a global bank, but they are still very much strong in Asia or in Europe or in the Americas. So even if you would use the best of breed banks, you still end up with quite a substantial banking group, really from an operational cash management point of view. The other part of the equation is, of course, that also as a company, you require funding. You have lending needs, so you need to go to a bank to ask them to fund your working capital, to fund your investments in new plans. Typically, you do this at many different banks. Sometimes because it is a different project requiring different bank, sometimes because a single project is so large that you need multiple banks to fund this one project. So there can be many reasons why you are working with many different banks. Why you need that information on a daily basis is, well, in an ideal world, you really want to optimize your balances across different banks. So you want to avoid that you are taking a loan in one location, whereas you have excess cash available in another location. You could do this, to your point, with some, you could do this once a week, once a month, look at this. But the more advanced your treasury teams becomes, the more you want to do this really on a daily basis. So you want to avoid lending where not needed, and you want to avoid having excess cash in places where it is not put to the best use. So you could use it for working capital purposes in a different location, or in a much simpler scenario, you simply look at what bank account gives you the highest interest rate and you want to put it there. For the last couple of years, this has not been a discussion. There was no interest at all, but we see that changing. We see that changing in the last couple of months.
So it's mostly cost driven, right? You don't want to borrow in one location if you can lend from another, because that costs money basically. So it's purely cash optimization strategy. You want to use as much as possible the group's funds, and then, if necessary, borrow more money here and there.
Yeah, okay. Are there different types of connectivity technology? Is like the back end of it as well, or does banks communicate with each other using certain platforms? Right, we've talked about previous in the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you see in the interbank world is the SWIFT network. So one very small step back, if a corporate treasury team decides that they want to automatically connect the banks to their systems, to their teams, then they need to start looking, okay, what is the technology that I'm deploying? And then there are different types of technology and different networks available. The most well-known one, I guess, is the SWIFT network. typically a interbank network. It's quite expensive. Different banks deploy a different view on what the standards in the network are. So you probably have heard in your earlier shows about the MT940 format. MT940 sounds very much like a standard, but if you start receiving MT940s from different banks, then you will find out very quickly that the content of those files is very different. So that's a bit of a drawback for the corporate use case.
So,
Or Swift.
sorry to interrupt you here. Can you describe what an MT940 is exactly? What does it mean and how does it work?
Yes, it's the standard message template for sending transaction and account balance information, typically end of day information. Simply by the name of it, MT940, it sounds very much like a standard, but that's a bit of a misconception, because if you start to receive different MT messages from different banks, you will see that what is in the actual message and what is in the actual data fields, it differs a bit per bank.
So the templates might be the same, but the way the information is structured within the file is different from banks to another.
Exactly. The big benefit of the Swift network is that it is a very wide network. So there's somewhere between 13 and 15,000 participants in the network. Again, typically this is a interbank network, so not necessarily fit for corporate use cases, unless perhaps you are really a large global institution or a global commercial party. Then this could be of interest for you. Then moving on to the technology that we see being much more used in the corporate space, that is the traditional host-to-host connectivity. The big advantage here is that this type of technology is available to many bank clients. In the files that are exchanged over host-to-host, you can include a lot of data, rich data, so you have as much detail as possible over the actual transactions. And then because host-to-host technology in itself is really a old technology, everybody knows how to work with host-to-host connectivity. Files are easily picked up for further usage in the company. So whether that is by humans or by further systems, it is very light on the client's infrastructure. Technology is simple.
So host-to-host sounds like it's a custom communication setup between two banks, but
the corporate use case between the corporate client and the bank. It is custom made, but it is very easily explained and it is very easily put in a manual. So it is not complex. And if a corporate has a IT team, the IT team will know for sure how host-to-host connectivity works.
Why would you choose host-to-host compared to Swift or the other way around? So we have the pros of each, but
yeah. Well, pricing is very very different. Swift is a expensive technology to deploy and to maintain. Data richness typically is better on the host-to-host channels. Of course, it all depends a bit on the quality of the sending bank, but typically we see that over host-to-host you can have really rich data for your transactions. Now, why is that helpful to have rich transaction data? This is helpful if you want to automate your reconciliation processes between open accounts receivable and actual incoming payments. The more data about the actual payment there is, the more data you can use to compare the transaction data to the accounts receivable data. The more information there is, the higher level of automated reconciliation you can achieve. So that's a big advantage of data richness. Now, of course, there is a small drawback to the host-to-host services as well. They are available to most corporate clients, but some banks decide to offer this service only to their corporate plus clients. So if you are a smaller entrepreneur, it is not always a given that you have access to this technology.
How do you do then if you're a smaller size company? You just do not connect, or?
Well, you can do the manual downloads, for example.
Okay.
That would be a solution that is deployed quite often. The underlying argumentation here is that this multi-bank complexity mostly is relevant for the larger companies. The banks have tailored their offering to that.
makes sense. Okay, so we have Swift and host to host. What, anything else? Any other?
Yeah, of course. For the last couple of years, APIs are all the hype, and we are now getting to that point where it is slowly starting to migrate from hype to reality. Ultimately, this is still very much a view on the future for corporate use cases, and the promise is that these bank APIs, can deliver data on demand. So, for example, for account balance information, this has very serious potential, and we see good examples already in the market of this materializing. We are strong believers in it. Also, here the technology is fairly straightforward. The big drawback is that APIs today are very unique per banks. So what they typically do, they show you their door or their gateway where to get the data. They show you the API spec, but thereafter it's up to you. So you start receiving the data, and then you need to find really a way to harmonize the incoming data feeds from the different banks API into a harmonized format that you as a corporate treasury team can use, either as a person or as a system. So this is a bit of a drawback here. Another smaller drawback is that it is very different between banks how rich the data is as well that they are making available through the API. Again, end of day or near real time balance information. That is what those banks can offer through their APIs. But then one level deeper, all the information about the specific transactions. And there again, you start to see a huge differentiation between the quality and the richness of the data that the different banks are providing to their corporate users.
Awesome. And here, price-wise, where are we located exactly? Is it more expensive than host-to-host, less than Swift's? How does it work?
It depends a bit. The theory goes that it is more efficient to deploy these API connections, and therefore it could be a bit cheaper. Another view why this could be a bit cheaper is because API is all the hype, and bank wants to show that they are offering APIs to their clients. Another view is that the cost should be fairly comparable because from a use case perspective, getting your account balances, getting your transaction information, use case is pretty much the same. So some banks argue, I don't care really what channel you are using. The benefit for you is the same, so the price is the same. Different views possible here.
Makes a lot of sense. So I have the feeling that the Swift connection will be very global. You're likely to be able to connect to a very wide range of financial institutions and banks. Host to host, you have to tailor it per bank, right? You have one connection per bank. So if you're connected to 5, 10 banks, you have to establish one host to host connection per bank. And it will be the same for API, basically.
Yeah, correct. And then there's a small nuance there for companies like ourselves. We operate a couple of host to host channels with the banks that we work with very often.
Okay.
That's a big benefit for the customers, for example, that work with our company. They do not need to establish their bank to client host-to-host channels themselves. They can simply leverage the host-to-host connections that we as a company already have in place with a number of banks. That's a bit in between there.
Awesome. Okay, so you act as a mini Swift network, so to say. You're already connected to the bank, so you enable the clients to be connected as well through you.
Yes, exactly
Awesome.
that. Yeah.
Okay. So
have connections per region of each bank. So like, to name a few, if you have like, I'm from the UK, so I know Barclays, for example. If there's Barclays UK and Barclays Europe, I don't know if they're in Europe, would you have individual connections to each, or is one okay for each, for all of them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Wissam. This is the ugly part of global banks. This really depends on the banks. There are large global banks that have this very uniform backend, but there are also very large, well-known brands, but they don't have this single large universal backend. What we tell our customers is that they should not care about the quality of their bank. We as a firm take care of that complexity. So if you tell us you are working with Barclays, we will enable the connectivity with Barclays, and whether that requires 1, 2, or 3 backend connections, that's our concern. We would like to take that complexity away from our customers.
And in the States, in the US, where a lot of our listeners are from, would you also have like state by state can also be different potentially as well?
Could be different, maybe not necessarily for a single bank in the States, but in the States you have a huge number of smaller local banks.
Yeah.
and that they all require their different host connections if available. Yeah.
You mentioned for smaller companies that they may have to download directly the file and reconcile manually, right? This makes me think of something we usually refer to, which is the EBS, electronic banking system. Is it where those smaller companies will download their reports from, or what? How do they access to those, basically?
Yeah, so two ways around that. One is indeed through the electronic banking system. Then when you start clicking around in the EBS system, you would typically find a section somewhere where you can export reports in the desired format, ranging from CSV, PDF, possibly also to the MT940 type of statement, a file format. And there are also some banks that have plugins available to, for example, the smaller or local domestic pieces of accounting software. This is something that is widely available, for example, in the Dutch market, where Dutch markets have APIs directly into the smaller accounting platforms. But this is very local and does not work for global corporates.
Is that the same thing as online banking?
Yes. Yes.
Basically what it is.
It is. Yeah.
But instead of having so in Belgium we have ING, and we just go on our app that would be at a corporate size. But indeed, even though I'm thinking if you have like hundreds or thousands of bank accounts, it might be a bit more cumbersome to go to your different ones and reconcile the cash positioning.
Yeah, absolutely. And most banks, for within that banks, they have that arranged, taken care of in their app, which you're totally right. Yeah.
I think you're talking about reminds me of, we're doing a payment series just recently, and we talked a lot about Visa and MasterCard. It was basically saying that that's basically the connectivity that me, when I have a credit card or whatever, my bank can pay to a shopping or a shop's bank through Visa. Why don't we just use Visa or MasterCard, please? Or is it the same thing? What's the difference here?
It's a different thing, but it is complementary. So in the context of bank connectivity, where the link is here, that the link exists to the extent that you want to integrate your card transactions in your overall transaction overview, or to the extent where you want to include your online wallet balances in your overall cash overview. So that is where the two areas touch. And this is also where we help our customers with. So for example, if you want to have this daily cash overview, you might have cash stored in a PayPal wallet or at Adyen's. So that type of information we open up to the corporate customers as well. Same for card payments. If you want to have the card transaction information available within your ERP or within your financial software, that is what we take care of.
And you connect to take some examples, Visa, MasterCard as well. So on top of connecting to some banks via host-to-host or whatever way API, you do this also for the card payment networks, right? Which is a bit of a different thing. But you do this as well. Okay. So maybe going back to the bank connectivity topics, what type of information are exchanged here? So we talked about what goes from the bank towards the corporates, but what about the other way around?
Yeah, that's a great question, and perhaps for corporates in practice, the more risky area. So the other way around, then you talk about payments, and there's of course the status reports and the tracking of payments, and that is one. But the key really here is to realize that once connectivity is in place, the next challenge starts really with the payment formats and payment templates. And those payment formats and payment templates, they vary across banks, they vary across payment products, and they vary across countries. So how on earth are you going to get that nice single large payment batch out of your ERP or out of your accounting software to the banks, to the correct bank in the required format, and for that specific payment product? For corporates themselves, this challenge is close to impossible to fix themselves. And this is where software solution providers can add tremendous value, where in case of our platform, what we do is we would absorb this one single large batch out of the ERP, this large payment batch. There might be 1,000 payments in there. And then our platform splits and converts all payment information in that one large batch into the smaller batches for each bank in the specification that is needed for that bank's requirements for that specific payment product. So this is a nuance per bank, per product, per country. This is really the big part of the help we provide on the payments area. It is impossible, close to impossible, for corporates to manage this complexity themselves. The bank statement side, the incoming side, it's a bit simpler and it's a bit less risky, of course, because it's really only about information and not about sending money somewhere else. So it's a bit less risky. The complexity in terms of formats is the same between the two.
Okay. So what you can do from a corporate standpoint is, on top of receiving information from your bank, sending them information, and not only information, actually information to act upon, which is, I want to make a payment to that counterparty.
Yes.
Challenge you highlight here is, as a corporate, probably a multinational, I want to send multiple payments at the same time. So a batch of payments to different banks and so on. And so the bank connectivity tool allows to just receive the bulk and then treat the information. So all the right amount of money are sent to the right bank and the information is correctly transmitted.
Yes. That's a very good summary, Guillaume. Thanks for that.
Pleasure. So talking about that complexity, how can you make sure once you've sent your payments that it's properly either executed or on the right way, on the right highway, motorway, whatever? Like, do you have a kind of status report that you can find and that your bank can send you through this bank connectivity as well?
Yes, exactly. There's different types of technology available, and that technology then can be transformed into information that is digestible by human beings, for example, through a very simple traffic light system. So the payments have been sent, they are in process, and they have been accepted by the receiving bank. So there are different technologies available. Traffic lighting is the most intuitive one, where you can really put on a dashboard for the corporate end user, typically a natural person, to see, hey, my payments are underway, they have been confirmed, all is good, or not, of course.
Yeah, super clear. So we have the payments, we have the payment status report, and also the information on where is the payment, and did it arrive or not. We have the bank statements, meaning all the information your bank sends you regarding your bank account, your transactions, your account receivables information, meaning, okay, this arrived on your bank account, it's here. Anything else that could be sent through the bank connectivity channels, either from the corporate to the bank or the other way around?
What we get asked about a lot by our clients is this thing called bank account management. And then if you read the corporate treasury press, there is every now and then this news about electronic bank account management.
Yeah.
In practice, we see that this is fairly limited. There ultimately is no real market standard to take care of this. Okay. Again, this EBOM thing, we get asked about it, but in practice, we see limited uptake at the bank's side. What is interesting, however, is that once you have the centralized payment software as a service solution, or let's call it a payment hub, in place, it becomes very simple to start managing your users' authorizations, your users' rights, and the payment approval processes, and whether that should be 4 eyes, 6 eyes, sequential, parallel, centralized, or decentralized. So on top of getting the correct banking information in, the correct payment information out, this extra level of added security, and organized in this one place, this is a big driver for companies to start looking into bank connectivity. If you start talking with corporate treasurers, they get a new employee in their own team or in their local team abroad, and then they need to add this user to bank portals, bank accounts, give mandates. This very fastly becomes a very cumbersome effort. With a technological solution in place, so having established the bank connectivity, you can manage the user rights within this single platform, because the technical connection between the corporate and the bank has been established, it's been secured. All natural person interactions over that channel can be managed out of a single piece of software. So you do not need to tell all banks that if Hussam is leaving the company, you do not need to go to all banks to tell them that Hussam have left the company and that the rights should be revoked. You simply go into this one online portal, valid for all banks. You disable Hussam, take away his authorization rights, and that's it. And the other way around, the new company that is hiring Hussam simply onboards him. Likewise, only in this portal, no need to do this at all individual bank levels.
Awesome. So not only do you get the information on what is happening on your bank account, you can also see and manage who can act upon your bank account, who is authorized to sign like transfers whatsoever.
Yes.
The signatories, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Super clear. One of the things that annoys me the most with my bank is how much they charge me, my bank fees. Is there a way for corporates to have a view on that? And does it pass by the bank connectivity channel as well, or how is that information reported on?
This information is not reported on in a very standard manner. What you can do is that if a bank is sending you this explicit information, it is possible to use the transaction codes to generate automated reports that put every transaction that has code so-and-so, aggregate all those transactions and give you a view on the explicit bank views. But then it is a requirement that the bank is sending this information in a structured way, and this is not always the case.
And I imagine, again, the information formats and template would vary a lot between one bank and another.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking us through on what bank connectivity is. We like to usually go into the nitty-gritty technical details as well a little bit. What's the actual process of setting up this bank connectivity channel? I'm guessing there's loads of firewalls in place. Banks are very IT secure in general. So setting up access rights to external companies, let alone internal, like as well, they also have issues. And must be quite a challenge. So what's the actual practical process? You go to a bank that you want to add into your peer-to-peer network.
Yes.
And you get that started. And what do you need? What do they need?
Yeah, so it depends a bit on the partner that you are working with. In our case, we do have quite a large network of banks that we work with on a recurring basis. So there we can do a lot on behalf of the client. So the bank knows who we as a company are. We have the agreements in place and all that. So there the client can tell us, for example, for ING Bank, the client tells us, okay, please onboard me on your channel with ING. It's very light for the clients. For other banks or maybe in more remote locations, we ask the clients to tell their bank, we like to establish a host-to-host connection with Cobase or with yourselves for the purpose of getting the information to Cobase. And then here this discussion is initiated by the corporate client. They know the bank, they know their relationship manager at the bank, but from that point, we take over. So after the introduction is done, I think I've mentioned it somewhere else in this episode that we like to keep this complexity away from clients. So after the introduction has been done, we know who the people are we should talk to. Then we take over from the client, really make sure that they only reap the benefits of the end result, having cash visibility, having the payment infrastructure in place. You do not want to burden them with this whole complexity, technological complexity.
And do you do that directly? Do you guys have software vendors that you use, or do you use like an in-house team for all of that?
We use an in-house team for all of that. It is part of our offering. We think we can be most successful by doing this in-house. So we have a dedicated team for bank implementation. It is literally the name of the team is the bank implementation team, and they do nothing else than implementing banks for corporate users. That's their day job. They work on the interaction between banks and the company. And there's a client implementation team, also again a local true Cobase team that helps the clients through their implementation process. So we help them with the documentation, if any is requirement between themselves and the banks, of course, between ourselves and them. We help them with setting up the portal, the dashboards. What is the information that you want to see? Who are the users that you want to onboard in the platform? So that's really done by us, and it depends a bit on the vendor that the company is talking to. Some vendors work more with consultants. Some vendors work more with external IT consultants. For specific bank connectivity part, we do it in-house for the client.
Just to be clear, you guys offer mainly peer-to-peer connectivity, or you also do the APIs and the other stuff, or Swift even?
Assuming by peer-to-peer, you mean the host-to-host, which in essence is peer-to-peer. So that's you're totally right there. This is also part of complexity that we take away from clients. So the client tells us we want to deal with bank so-and-so. And then we look, okay, what is the information and the information richness that the client needs? And then we suggest to the client what the best technology is. So whether it's host-to-host or if an API is available and it meets the level of requirements that the client needs, we can suggest API. For example, if a company only needs reporting with a bank in a remote area where we think that due to language or understanding how working with third parties works, it is not very efficient to do host-to-host, then we suggest to the client, well, dear client, we understand you need account information from bank so-and-so, for example, in Japan. Then we would suggest, okay, let's use the Swift network. Nice part about Cobase is that we are a regulated company. We are supervised by the Dutch Central Bank. So we have a bank equivalent status in the Swift network. We have our own Swift big code. So we would simply ask this Japanese bank to send the Swift message to the Cobase big code, and we can make it then available to the client. But to put it short, also deciding what type of technology we deploy in connecting to the bank, we keep this complexity away from the client, and we propose the technology that we think suits best with the actual client need.
The more you talk, just the more I think about fintechs. There's more and more fintechs popping up every day. I'm guessing there are some in this field as well. How's the acceleration of the fintech industry changed bank connectivity overall, in your opinion? Or has it at all?
It forces banks to be more outward looking and be more aware of what clients actually need. What is it that a treasury team actually needs? The whole acceleration in the fintech space has forced banks really to open up and start thinking about this. And they become very aware that things that were perhaps agreed years ago, like PSD2, that ultimately this is not only theory, but there should be meat on the bones there. So companies are starting to ask banks, hey, how about PSD2? How about your APIs? How do I get real-time balance information? And then what fintechs do is that they fill this void between banks, commercial and banks, tech teams, and themselves. There is this technology part that needs to be fulfilled, and that's being fulfilled by fintechs. In case of bank connectivity, our firm is one of the examples there.
What is PSD2, Joost? You mentioned it a couple of times. What is it exactly?
Yeah, PSD2, in very short, is a regulation that forces banks to open up their account statement data, for example, to third parties, and those third parties then are able to help the end consumer. Mostly used in the retail sphere, but you can imagine every natural treasurer is also a retail person. So what your experience in private life is sets the bar for expectations in your professional life. That's what we see in that area.
So PSD2 is the regulation behind open banking, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
To your information.
Yeah. So it's the European interpretation of the broader concept of open banking. Yeah.
Super clear. When you touched upon implementation and the work your team, bank implementation team does, sounds like there is a lot of technology aspects, a lot of departments involved potentially. How does this whole connects to the company actually? As a corporate, what does my bank connectivity tools, such as the Cobase one, for instance, where would it connect and integrate? Is it through the ERP? I think you mentioned it a bit earlier. Is it through the TMS? We did a whole episode on Treasury system, so our audience is a bit aware of it. But how does the bank connectivity tool integrate into all this?
Question here is, what does the client want?
Okay.
For some clients, they simply want a dashboard and a tooling to initiate payments to different banks without having to worry about all the different portals. For them, we have the online cloud solution for them to log in. Let's call it their Cobase website. They log in and have all information there online in the Cobase GUI. For the larger part of the customers that we help, they want to use that information further downstream or upstream, if you like. So we aggregate all account information, account balances, transactions. We convert and harmonize that to one single, let's call it a Cobase format. And then we make sure that this Cobase format is made available to the ERP system or the TMS. That can be both. We typically call this the ERP system. TMSs can be part of an ERP system. For us, it doesn't really matter if the client tells us, I want to consume the data in system so-and-so. We'll make sure that the data is made available to that specific system. And in practice, most of the corporate clients do want to use this in an automated way in a different system.
Makes a lot of sense. I want to dig a little bit more into the Cobase offering, but before that, I would like to wrap up maybe these nitty-gritty details of the bank connectivity aspects by one last question, especially when it comes to Swift. So I keep on hearing about having a company's BIC, a big, I think you touched upon it, the big corporates can be registered with Swift directly. I think there is also a Swift offering, which is the Swift Alliance Lite 2, which is also, I guess, a way to connect to the banks. Are there others, and what are all those? What's different connection types possible, basically, when it comes to Swift?
Yeah, in all honesty, I am not the specialist in the Swift field. When I talk to treasurers, they are mostly curious about the alternatives to Swift and the different offerings that they have. Also in Swift Alliance Lite, you still have to operate your local server to receive all those documents, so also files. So also that is not very straightforward. So our role when it comes to Swift is mostly that we are, as a regulated entity, are participating in the network for the benefit of the client. So as explained before, we use the Cobase big code to receive, for example, the MT940s on behalf of our customers. What a big benefit here is of the global Swift network is exactly that wide global reach. It's an easy way to connect to the more exotic banks that do not offer, for example, these host-to-host services. For a deep dive on the different flavors of Swift-based connectivity itself, I'm very sure you will find guests that can tell you much more about it than myself.
No, that's already super clear. Thanks a lot.
So, I mean, just take us through what Cobase does then exactly. So, you mentioned quite a few times the kind of things that you offer, but give us not the sales pitch, but the overview of what exactly you guys do and how you help your clients and etc. and what services you offer exactly.
Yeah, sure. So today we offer 3 solutions. The first one is what we call the Cobase Bank Connector. And the Bank Connector provides a powerful integration between banks and bank accounts and specific ERP systems. For example, Oracle Netsuite. Balance and transaction information from the banks is converted and ready for use within Oracle Netsuite specifically, the other way around for payments. This is a narrow but very focused offering at a price point accordingly. And this was launched last year. It's a big success so far. It fulfills a very clear need. And that need is, how on earth do I get my bank and transaction data in NetSuite? That's what we fix for clients. So that is the Bank Connector. It's specifically geared towards a specific ERP system. Then the core Cobase offering, that is the Cobase Payment Hub. And for the Payment Hub, you are not bound to a specific ERP. Or the Payment Hub offers this much richer GUI, which is not necessarily there for the Bank Connector. So we have the richer GUI where you can, for example, enter manual payments in the actual platform itself. It also allows for more advanced workflow designs, has a richer reporting and dashboarding functionalities. And then lastly, there's the Treasury management system, and that is essentially the Payment Hub, but it is enriched with functionalities for dealing FX, calculating and hedging FX risks, in-house banking, liquidity forecasting, and balance optimization. So when you enable these modules, you are essentially deploying a light TMS system. Now, what is true for all three offerings and what is the technological core of Cobase is that all three offerings include this fully managed bank connectivity and file transformation service. And again, this is a dedicated Cobase team that takes care of bank connectivity and of file transformation. And that is the core intellectual knowledge, if you like, of the Cobase teams to take all this complexity away from the clients.
Is it so? Are all those three service offerings all cloud-based solutions? I think you mentioned it for one of the offering, but are all the others as well?
Yeah, everything is cloud-based. Yeah.
So just to be clear again for listeners, the cloud-based means that it sits on. You don't come in and install any softwares on your client's servers. You have a central software somewhere they connect via the internet, basically.
It is exactly that. Yeah, it is exactly that. That gives easy deployments. So that's easy for clients. For us, it's easier to maintain. And for the large cloud providers, financial services, security is really on top of their agenda. So also from a security point of view, it's very beneficial for clients.
Very clear, Joost. Thank you so much. Can you maybe explain us how Cobase helps corporate connected to their banks, and how do you differentiate exactly from other service providers in the same industry?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. There are a couple of players like us in the market. We think that we are different because we are licensed by the Dutch Central Bank, and this essentially provides comfort to our clients that we operate on a bank equivalent system and process security. So that's quite a big one. From a operational point of view, file transformation and especially the maintenance of those files is always standard included in our service. This does not come at additional fees, or whenever in the future bank formats change, which they do all the time, we would not charge you separately. We want to be you as carefree as possible. So this is all done in the background, kept away from you and not built to you. And this is not a given for all participants in the market. The last one here that I like to mention is that we offer really high service levels. And of course, this can be just a marketing line, but the relationships we work with, they all like working with us. Also, or perhaps especially after all the gloss of the sale process is gone, because on day one it's a sales pitch and everything is hunky-dory. And then the rough work of the implementation starts. We get very good feedback from our clients there. Just as an example, TMI recently published an interview between Joanne, who is the group head of cash management, and myself. And this one is this interview. It's a good read, but this is really a true testament to this point of how happy customers are with the cooperation after the sales process.
Awesome. Is it the same, because it's not only an interview with TMI, right? I think you were nominated for an award. Is it the same one? The highly commented.
Exactly. So the award came after. Thanks a lot. The award came after the interview. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. I recall this one. And again, it proves the whole sales pitch. I know from experience that the implementation experience can be much different from the sales pitch. Where do you, just for my curiosity, where do you operate geographically? Is it because if it's a cloud-based solution, you can be anywhere in the world, right? Is it the case right now? Do you have a specific market you're focusing on? What's the point here?
Yeah, great question. So we connect with banks worldwide. We work for legal entities of companies worldwide. If you look at where we focus our marketing efforts, then it is for European Treasury centers. Now, this can be for European Treasury centers for, logically, European companies, but this can also be for European Treasury centers, for example, for US-based companies. And this is really from the practical point of view that the implementation team is here locally. We like to work with actual people on the Cobase payroll, not to outsource all this work. So working with European teams is the best way that we can guarantee that we deliver on our promise. So we work with European Treasury teams during European business hours. That said, if those European Treasury entities do need to connect to global banks, that's no problem at all. That is what we do on a daily basis. And if those European companies have entities across the globe, that's also no problem at all. That's what we do on a daily basis.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Can you maybe walk us through a use case where you have implemented a bank connectivity solution? I don't know if you want to talk about the one you got awarded for. And I would like also you to maybe focus on what were the benefits. So what was the problem statement from the client? What were they trying to achieve? And thanks to the Cobase solution, what happened and what were the benefits at the end?
Yeah, the one from the award, I'll urge every listener to give that one a read. It's a nice read. But another one, and it is a use case that we come across quite often, that is for companies that are growing and expanding rapidly. So whether it is organically or whether it is through a acquisition mode. You can imagine that if you are starting to acquire companies in, for example, different companies, and you've not had a relationship before, then each and every acquisition comes with its own banking landscape, its own financial software, its own ERP systems, its own natural persons that are working there. And for companies in an acquisition mode, it can be very complex to have, first of all, to have quick insight of what is happening financially in the newly acquired company. And then secondly, can be very complex to have control over what is happening locally. Now, I'm not suggesting that the software enables total centralization of every acquisition. Of course, it is possible. But the key thing that the companies are looking for is to have at least insight and control over what is happening. So you can be very comfortable with payments still being approved locally in the newly acquired company, but at least you want to know what the authorization rights are. In the newly acquired company, you want to know what the cash balances are. And this is a use case that we have come across quite often. This is why clients like Cobase. It easily scales with them. The example I just gave is for a company that is essentially in a constant acquisition modus. But we have also a company that is constantly expanding into new markets organically. And also there, they find it very convenient to have a platform like Cobase in place that whenever they move into a new market, and I think this is one of Wissam's point really in the beginning of this interview, where he said, why do you have all these many banks? Well, if you go to a new country, typically you want to start working with a local bank, and then you want to have this local bank onboarded in your financial infrastructure as soon as possible. With the Cobase platform in place, it's very easy to start adding new banks. Also here, this takes away a lot of this complexity. If you are growing or if you are acquiring, you have many things on your plate. The one thing that you do not want to worry about is bank connectivity. And that's what we help our customers with.
Awesome. And talking about the benefits, when you have a client expanding and wants to be connected to a new bank in an exotic country, let's say, do they have to do the work themselves? Is it quote unquote easy to implement on the corporate side, or does your team take it in charge? How does it work here?
For the team on the client side, this typically is easy.
Okay.
For us, it's not, but it is what we like to do. Exactly, that's the point. It's what we like to do, and because of our experience, we tend to think that we can do this a bit better than the corporate customer themselves. But the ambition is always to make this as easy and painless for the customer as possible.
Okay, super clear. And again, sorry, I'm getting really curious, but when so I'm expanding, I want to be connected to a new bank. If we are in the case where Cobase is not initially connected to that bank, will you establish the connection then by yourself as well? And it's something you add for your portfolio, and then for the future clients, you will also be connected already, right? So the further you grow, the further your network grows as well, and then the future clients coming can basically enjoy and profit from all these new banks connected.
Yeah, that's a great question, and really how we as a business like to think. So whenever we approach a new bank, the actual introduction typically happens with the help of the customer, because the customer already knows the bank and has a relationship. So they tell their bank, we would like you to start working with Cobase on making our data available. For us, we always try to explore the route first where we can have the channel in our name, exactly to do what you are describing. If the channel is in our name, in the Cobase name, you can simply add clients later on and really building this library. This is fine for banks that are aware of this tech side and have done this before. They typically tend to cooperate, but many banks find this a bit too new for them.
Okay.
So their new clients do not literally enter the same channel, but because we have worked with the people at that new bank before, also establishing a connection in name of the client becomes fairly easy because we know the people, we know the bank. So in that sense, we are building maybe not necessarily this library, well, bank-specific library, yes, but not a library of repurposable connections. But we are building this network of banks that know how to work with Cobase.
Super clear. Makes a lot of sense. Joost, that was super insightful. Thank you so much. Anything else you would like to add either on bank connectivity as a topic or on Cobase that we maybe didn't touch upon?
No, thanks a lot for the information, for the invitation, Guillaume. It's been a very pleasant hour. The only message I would like to give the listeners is whenever you are exploring this domain of bank connectivity, do your market sounding, be very sure about the questions that you need to ask. There is, in this complex field, a big difference between marketing and actual delivery. This is not easy to figure out yourselves. To put it very simple, my mailbox or LinkedIn box is always open for a quick sounding session.
Perfect.
Not necessarily to buy, but to share.
Yeah, share information.
Exactly.
I was going to come to it. It feels like, so you mentioned the interview. I see you guys are sharing a lot on LinkedIn, on your website. So you read these articles and so on. So that's maybe a good way to start, right? Just informing yourself about the resources out there on the internet. Compare, of course, like cross checks, but definitely there are some resources available. And talking about Cobase, if people would like to know more about you, read those articles, know more about the interview you mentioned for Tenemos, where should they go? And also for the LinkedIn of you and your company.
Yeah, exactly. So our website, www.cobase.com. If you want to do it more personal, it's my first name dot last name @cobase.com. Feel free to email me directly or look me up at LinkedIn, and I'll find you in the message box there, fully available.
This is awesome. We'll put all the links in the description. So if you'd like to check them out, just go in the podcast description and use LinkedIn profile will be there, Cobase as well. And we will put the resources we mentioned, such as the interview one, so people can go directly there. Joost, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Guillaume.